Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
The Torah that we're going to be studying this morning is continuing in the book of Deuteronomy. I'm going to give a brief overview of the setting of Deuteronomy because it's not really until this year, it only took me to age 60, that I have a little more appreciation for the book of Deuteronomy. The theology is so different in some ways from what we preach and believe and lean into that it's been really inaccessible to me for a long time, particularly the understanding that suffering as a result of disobedience to the covenant and to the law. But in really studying, I told you that I got this book where I was studying about the Bible as parts of the Bible as a response to trauma and destruction. I just was able to read it from a little slightly different place this year. Myself, all of us, being in a town that burned down, even if, again, you didn't live in the Palisades, you are trauma adjacent just by the fact that we are all so freaked out and displaced and decentralized. And so I read Deuteronomy differently this year. I've been reading it through that lens of you've just watched everything burn. And even if people weren't impacted by it, they can't help but witness what happened, and they can't help but be touched by it in some way. So everybody's got to make meaning out of that. Everybody's got to make sense out of that. The Deuteronomist is going to do that differently than we do, but not entirely differently. So I'm able to hold those texts with a bit more compassion, understanding that they are in response to the destruction of the North, which I don't think I ever really took as seriously as I needed to before. If you place it in the time of Hezekiah or you place it in the time of Josiah, and scholars break Deuteronomy down into layers. The oldest layer is probably the corpus of laws. That's probably an older text. The Song of Moses at the end is probably a very old text. And then we have some stuff that's the time of Hezekiah and the religious reform of Hezekiah and Josiah, King Josiah, who also carries out a religious reform. It is the centralization of worship in the temple in Jerusalem. But we shouldn't ignore that much of the material comes from Israel, from the north, refugees who are coming to the south, bringing their experience of their city being sieged and then horribly destroyed by the Assyrians, horrible destruction by the Assyrians, who were famous for it and wrote lots of propaganda that they published throughout the Mideast. And we have archaeological remnants of it, I showed you the city of Lachish being besieged, and then the horrible things that were done to people of fighting age, being flayed alive, being impaled from the tush through the head. I mean, just like horrible, horrible things on purpose to terrorize people, to not rebel against the treaty, the covenant treaty between the king of Assyria and the kings that Assyria conquered, or, brought under subjugation and heavy, heavy taxation. Such was the case with Israel. Israel rebelled against Assyria. The Deuteronomist is writing in the context of refugees bringing their story from the north about a rebellion against the king, breaking the covenant that Israel had signed with the king of Assyria. So you start to see how, for me, it's like it starts to shift Deuteronomy a little when you start thinking about it's written by people responding to utter devastation and destruction brought on by rebellion against a covenant of exclusivity and loyalty to the king. If we understand that that's the context Deuteronomy is written in, I think we can appreciate a little differently the fact that the Deuteronomist uses breaking the covenant with God as king as being the source of destruction. So in a way, Deuteronomy is a revolutionary text in that it says, don't read King of Assyria being responsible for the destruction of the northern kingdom. That's not what happened, people. What happened is We broke faith. We broke the covenant, not with Assyria. We broke the covenant with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And that is why the north fell. Even though that's not our theology, and that's generally where I think I have focused, I'm wearing different lenses now. It's actually a brave and revolutionary act to say it wasn't the king of Assyria that did this. It was our king, right? Like, what a way to say we're taking power back from the mightiest empire ever known on the face of the planet. Assyria is the first empire, the mightiest empire. I showed you the map before. They rule everywhere that Israel would have been able to have contact with. But Israel says, that's not why they won. That's not why Israel and Israelites got kicked off their land and have to live in Judah now. It's because we broke faith. We broke our covenant with our king. And in order to stay in Judah and not have what happened to Israel happen to us, we better get it together and start keeping the meaning of the laws. Because Deuteronomy means second law, meaning a reiteration of the laws. But in my course with Micha Goodman, Dr. Micha Goodman from the Hartman Institute, what I learned is Deuteronomy doesn't recount all the laws that are in Exodus. Deuteronomy picks and chooses which laws to focus on. It's not actually a reiteration, a retelling of the law. It is taking a big old highlighter and highlighting certain laws by reiterating them and leaving other ones completely out. So I don't want to go too long into this. I know we're not really in the text, but I wanted to do all this before we even look at any of the text from today. The text from today is from Re'eh. This is from the second oration of Moshe in Deuteronomy. There are 3 speeches given by Moshe in the book of Deuteronomy. That's how the book is constructed. You can look on the internet and find how scholars break down when each part of Deuteronomy is written. We are at the beginning of the second oration, the second speech of Moshe. And this is where we get this context of covenant, where we get which laws matter. And Micha points out that one of the things that seems to matter to the Deuteronomist, now remember, the Deuteronomist is writing while the prophets are preaching. And do you remember when we talked about Amos and those early prophets influencing the holiness code? And remember we talked about the huge inequity of wealth in ancient Israel? That inequity is what they're preaching about right before Hezekiah. And that's about 100 years or more before Josiah. So the Deuteronomist is writing with the critique of the prophets ringing in their ears, the school of Deuteronomy, about the inequities that are happening in Israel, and that is a breaking of the covenant, and that the people staying in the land at all, it's not about, Moshe doesn't end his whole life with a story about conquering the land. Our 5 books don't end with a whole story of how we conquered the land, about a war to win the land. That's not how we end our story. How do we end our story? It's how do you keep the land? That's what's important to the Deuteronomists, is not taking the land. That you don't see that anywhere. You see it in Joshua, but you don't see it in Deuteronomy. What do you see in Deuteronomy? You see how you can keep the land, earn staying in the land, because they've seen the destruction and they've seen the exile of the north to Assyria. Okay? That's the context in which we're looking now at the beginning of Re'eh, this parsha. So I'd like to begin there, look a little bit about what's happening with this agenda. And then I want to take if we have time, sometimes we don't have time, I want to take a giant step back as we're preparing to enter Elul and the preparation for high holidays, and take a giant step back to what our tradition has done with the fact that Re'eh happens right as we're entering Elul, and what our spiritual tradition has done with the fact that this Parsha is located right before we begin preparation for the high holidays. But if we don't get there, I will have the source sheet for you, and you can look at it yourself. But anyway, I'll at least show it to you. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. Well, not totally. Okay, so one more thing. Stop laughing, y'all. Micha pointed out that the centralization of worship in the temple that we're going to see in Re'eh, meaning sacrifice can only happen in the temple precinct now, It used to could happen anywhere. If you look through Torah, people build altars, they sacrifice on altars all over the place, right? Jacob makes an altar at Bethel. You could offer anywhere. So by saying you can now only have meat wherever you want, it could only be sacrificial meat before the Deuteronomists, it's only sacrificial meat that could be eaten, and you could sacrifice anywhere. Now, with the centralization of worship in the temple, it seems like sacrifice is even more important. But if you'll remember a few years ago, after I'd learned with Micha, I told you Micha's whole thing is it's the opposite. By centralizing sacrifice in the temple and in Jerusalem, you desacralize the eating of meat. You take sacrifice out of the daily lives of Israelites, because now they can only offer sacrifices in Jerusalem, and they can eat meat wherever they want. It doesn't have to be sacrificial meat anymore. What you do is you lower the status of sacrifice. It seems like it's making it more important, but it's doing the opposite. It's saying now you can eat meat wherever you want, and it takes that sacrificial element out of the eating of meat and out of the hands of the local priests and out of the people's daily lives. You desacralize one of their basic ways of celebrating, which is to eat meat. Okay? So you're taking the religious aspect out of one of their most important ways of gathering, which is to, kill a goat or whatever and roast it and eat it and have a massive meal together and a party and a barbecue, which we still do, right? This is still how we celebrate. Just come to a programming meeting at KI. And when we talk about having a program, you better believe one of the first things we talk about is, do we need to feed them? Generally, the answer is yes. And it's like, okay, how much? Heavy appetizers, a whole dinner? Are we going to have a barbecue? Right? Because that's really how we get together. We get together around meals, around big celebratory meals. And so what the Deuteronomist is doing is moving the religious and the sacrificial aspect off of meat eating in order to desacralize one of their major experiences, to shift from ritual importance to ethical and moral importance, which is what the prophets are screaming about. And
can I just ask, is the inclusion of wine sort of a substitute for meat and all this sacrificial stuff? I mean, wine became so important. Are you suggesting that that's what has come to stand in its place of sacrificing meat?
No, because wine was not a part of the temple ritual except like offering libations. Same with oil, same with lots of other stuff. So wine doesn't have a central place in the temple. It's later, it's rabbinic. So what was I saying? So a focus on the ethical. And so one of the sacrifices that does remain for the Deuteronomist important is the shlamim. The shlamim is the only sacrifice that's eaten with everybody, the poor, the foreigner, everybody. So the Deuteronomist still cares about the shlamim offering because it's not for the priests and the person wealthy enough to bring a goat. It's for everybody to eat, the whole community. That the Deuteronomist cares about because we're shifting away from ritual being important and shifting into how we behave ethically being important, because that is what the Deuteronomists believe will help Judah not have the same experience as Israel. Okay? All right. So those of us who've just had a city and our own homes burned to the ground, like we're just know that's the condition that the Deuteronomist is writing in. Let's take a look at some of these texts from the beginning of Re'eh.
Amy, I have a question. Was this
Yes, sir.
the first time in history that ethics were seen as influencing what happens as opposed to just placating gods or sacrificing to them?
Yes.
Because it's an interesting chain that how we deal ethically affects what society is like, whether you believe that that's how God makes it or whether you believe that's just how it is. I didn't know, but historically, is this just in Judaism or was it in world religion? I can't think of another one at that point, although later they do, but at that point it says, if you don't behave right, things are not going to turn out well.
Correct. So this is what Micha suggests is revolutionary about Deuteronomy. And as Rachel so eloquently reiterated, from what I understand, when I was late to the first Deuteronomy Torah study, she reiterated that this is the Constitution. This means you have to abide by the law in order for you to earn not being exiled from the land that you're in. And Micha goes further to say it's not simply the law, it's raising up the ethical aspects of the law and de-emphasizing the ritual aspect. Okay. Yes, and because the king can command everybody to do what the king wants, but in this case, the king is God, and God is completely ethical and moral. But in other religions and other pagan religions around early Israel, it was understood that the gods gave the law to the king. That the king wrote the law, but it was, in communication with the gods. So it's not absent from the neighbors of early Israel. But Israel's the first to understand that the king self is subject to the law because the law originates with God only. It does not in any way originate with the king. Not in partnership with God, blah, 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 none of that. God gives it to whom in Israel? To whom does God give the law in Israel? The people.
Everybody.
Everybody, exactly.
Moses.
So this is part of the revolutionary aspect of ancient Israel. And it's, coming on the world stage. Okay. So it's funny because we talk about a no king's march, but according to Deuteronomy, it doesn't matter if he's the king. He's still subject to the law. Fine. Become a king. Become an emperor. Fine. That's fine. The king is subject to the law. And the law comes from God, who is just and ethical and compassionate and cares about the needy and cares about the foreigner and cares about the vulnerable. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but I could go on for a while. Okay. Re'eh, the name of our parsha. Re'eh, see, look. So this is the sense of see as in understand, right? This is not look with your eyes, but of course the tradition is going to play on that as well. Re'eh, see. Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. I set before you hayom today, bracha, blessing, uklala, and curse. Et bracha asher tishma'u el mitzvot Adonai Elohechem asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom. Blessing if you follow, observe the commandments that Yud He Vav He, your God, that I place before you, that I command you hayom today. V'haklala im lo tishma'u el mitzvot Adonai Elohechem. And curse if you don't obey and keep the laws of Yud He Vav He, your God. V'sartem min haderech asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom. And you turn away, you turn from the path that I enjoin upon you today. Lelechet acharei Elohim acherim, to walk after other gods, asher lo yadatem, that you don't know, that you didn't experience. When God brings you into the land that you're about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Ebal. Both are on the other side of the Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the Arava, near Gilgal, by the terebinths of Moreh. For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that your God, Yud He Vav He, is assigning to you. When you have occupied it and are settled in it, take care to observe all the laws and rules that I have set before you this day. These are the laws and rules that you must carefully observe in the land that Yud He Vav He, God of your ancestors, is giving you to possess as long as you live on earth. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to dispossess worshipped their gods, whether on lofty mountains and on hills or under any luxuriant tree. Remember, Asherah was represented by a tree. Remember when we saw that tree with Yud He Vav He and Yud He Vav He's Asherah? Right? So that's what this luxuriant tree is referring to, Asherah. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts. Look at the Hebrew, Asherehem, right there. They're Asherot. They're representations of the goddess Asherah. And cut down the images of their gods, obliterating their name from that site. Do not worship your God, Yud He Vav He, in like manner. But look only to the site that your God, Yud He Vav He, will choose amidst all your tribes as God's habitation, to establish the divine name there. There you are to go. This is called the theology of the name. This means that God places God's name on the temple and on the city of Jerusalem. And so that's what is referenced here. This is about the temple. And there you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, your votive and freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks. Together with your households, you shall feast there before your God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, happy in all the undertakings in which your God has blessed you. You shall not act at all as we now act here, each of us as we please, because you have not yet come to the allotted haven that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that your God is giving you, and God grants you safety from all your enemies, okay, this is to Judah, who's seen Israel fall, and you live in security, then you must bring everything that I command you to the site where your God will choose to establish the divine name, your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, and all the choice votive offerings that you vow to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And you shall rejoice before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh with your sons and daughters. What does the Deuteronomist care about, and with whom else? Male and female slaves, along with the family of the Levite, because remember, the Levites have no territorial inheritance, for they have no territorial allotment among you. Take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place you like you've been able to do until now, but only in the place that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will choose in one of your tribal territories. There you shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, and there you shall observe all that I enjoin upon you. But whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements. That doesn't need to be here unless it's a change, right? So before, you couldn't do that. You had to offer it at a cult site. You had to offer sacrificial meat at a cult site, at an altar, and that was the only meat you could eat. But now, whenever you desire, you may slaughter and eat meat in any of your settlements, according to the blessing that your God has granted you. The impure and pure alike may take part of it. Okay, so now we're lessening the distinction between the ritually impure and the ritually pure. You see what Micha's point is? It's bringing down the importance of all of that ritual stuff that Leviticus cared so much about. But what does Deuteronomy still care a lot about? You can't eat the blood. You can't kill something and eat its blood for the life force. That is still, because that is an ethical issue, right? Eating the blood is an ethical issue for the Deuteronomist and in Leviticus. It's because you can't just slaughter things because you want to drink their blood and take their life force. They understood blood as the life force. You don't get to kill something and take its life force. So the Deuteronomist is still very concerned about that. So you can't drink any of the blood. You have to pour it out like water. You may not partake in your settlements of the tithes of your new grain or wine or oil or the firstlings of your herds and flocks or any of the votive offerings that you vow or of your freewill offerings or of your contributions. None of these things can happen in your villages anymore, people. It's desacralizing the daily life of Israelites. It's limiting the focus on the ritual nature of eating meat. You can't do any of this in your locale anymore, which means a lot of people aren't going to do it very much. So it's it looks like it's highlighting it by making it more important, by having it only happen in the temple, but Micha argues it's the opposite. It is moving away from the power of ritual slaughter and ritual firstlings being offered and all that stuff, and it's moving towards what the prophets are yelling and screaming about, which is ethical behavior. That's what will earn you a different fate than the North.
Amy, was this the writing of Deuteronomy? Is that believed to have been at the time of the prophets?
Yes.
So it is the same period of time.
Yes.
400, 500 BC?
No. This is, we're talking about Amos. We're talking about the 8th century.
But when was Deuteronomy supposedly written?
In the 8th century and the 7th century.
Okay, so it's the beginning of the prophetic period.
Of Amos and those folks, yes. This is when that we talked about one time, the huge inequity in Israel, in ancient Israel. Landowners being really wealthy, other folks being super poor. Now you have a lot of refugees pouring into Judah from the north. Okay. Now some people want to place parts of Deuteronomy post-Babylonian exile. That means it's after 586. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, there's something just really strikes me. The reason that we have the kosher laws with meat that does not have blood in it is because of this notion that it's all about not drinking, taking the life force. I mean, that That seems like an idea that kind of went out a long time ago. That is not where life force necessarily. Why are we still following this? I mean, I guess you can ask that of all kosher laws, but why?
Yeah, you can ask that about why are we not eating pork?
Yeah, because it says so.
Because it says so.
Because I understand that, but this notion of something not eating meat that has its life force in it seems like a really particularly primitive idea in terms of understanding where life. I mean, that could be the heart, could be could be the brain. I mean,
without blood, you don't live.
Well,
without a lot of things, you don't live.
If you're not, okay, listen, people. If you go to a steakhouse and order a ribeye, you're eating blood.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't follow this for the most part. Only people who are buying kosher meat follow this.
I understand that, but the notion of the life force, I mean that. All right, I guess that's
okay.
So it says so.
That is an anthropological interpretation. People who care about this don't say that. They said God says you can't eat the blood.
Right.
You can't eat swine, you can't eat crab, and you can't eat the blood. They don't worry about why. Those of us who are interested in where this comes from, because partly my bias in wanting an anthropological explanation is so it's not just superstition, but it's also that it was kind of an ethical understanding that you don't get to kill something and take its life because you want more life. You want more, portrait of
what you're saying
Dorian
is it doesn't say in the text or in any of the exegesis that it's about the life force. It's just God says.
Correct.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Sorry it took me that long to get there. All right. Be sure not to neglect the family of the Levite as long as you live in your land, right? So again, care for those who don't have a territorial land-holding tribe. When Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh enlarges your territory as promised and you say, I shall eat some meat, for you have the urge to eat meat, you may eat meat whenever you wish. If the place where Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is chosen to establish the divine name is too far from you, you may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep that God gives you as I have instructed you. And you may eat to your heart's content in your settlements. Eat it, however, as the gazelle and the deer are eaten. The impure may eat it together with the pure. Again, this desacralization of an important social component. But make sure that you do not partake of the blood, for the blood is the life, and you must not consume the life with the flesh. So there is some element of life here. You must not partake of it. You must not pour it out. You must pour it out on the ground like water. Okay. Votive and sacred donations have to be done in the temple in Israel. You shall offer right here on and on and on and on and on and on. Be careful to heed all these commandments that I enjoin upon you. Thus it will go well with you and with your descendants after you forever. For you will be doing what is good and right in the sight of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. When your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has cut down before you the nations that you are about to enter and dispossess, and you have dispossessed them and settled in their land, beware of being lured into their ways after they have been wiped out before you. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did those nations worship their gods? I will follow those practices. You shall not act thus toward your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, for they perform for their gods every abhorrent act that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh detests. They even offer up their sons and daughters in fire to their gods. We don't know if this is in fact true of Israel's neighbors, but if you want to say the worst thing possible about your neighbors, what do you say? They kill babies and put them under the Christmas tree. That's what the Christmas tree is for. So, right, it's the worst thing you can think of to accuse.
Is the verse before this why some Orthodox people think you should never even read Christian books or go into it?
Yes, right, because it could lead to dancing. So, right, okay. So here, we get more laws about loyalty to God, the one God. You have to be careful about, the dream diviner. Like, you have to be careful about anybody who claims to be speaking from the other side and having connection to other powers that make sense to follow right after, worshiping other gods, right? So, okay. So we're getting an iteration of law. Nothing here is ritual. So that's what you need to know. This is about not gashing yourselves. It's right. You are consecrated. You shall not eat anything abhorrent. You shall. This is a reiteration of some of what you're allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat. You can't eat roadkill. And then this is going into, if you can't get to Jerusalem to sacrifice, you can turn it into money and you can give money to the temple. And here we're going to get Shemitah. We're going to get the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. I'm not going to, I don't want to go into that, but again, this is laws about letting the land rest, and Yovel, the remunition, what's it called, of debt, and of all of that resetting every 50 years. So again, this is about justice. This is about equity. This is really about economic justice, social justice, which were not separate in the ancient world. And I'm going to argue they're not so separate today. What your zip code is determines a lot about how much you can expect to make, right, as we know. Okay. Whew. Questions, comments, anything so far? All right. I'm going to go without you to Micha and just check my notes about what Micha has to say about this. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. So like we just said that we get the prophets echoing a lot of what's happening in Jeremiah. So a lot of what we see in Deuteronomy is expressed in Jeremiah and in Isaiah, and really decentralizing certain aspects of the ritual, including the ark and all this other business. We don't hear anything about it in Jeremiah. We don't hear anything about it in Deuteronomy. And so Micha makes the point that Moshe takes the ark out of the past and Jeremiah takes the ark out of the future. And what we see, according to Micha, is that it really was dangerous to rely on the house of God and the having sacrifice be so important and all of those things, that God will protect us, and that it's a mixed thing in Deuteronomy, that you get a centralization of worship, but also, like I said, the desacralization of everyday eating meat. Now you don't have to sacrifice to have a bologna sandwich, and that it downplays, therefore, the role of the temple, the role of people going to the temple. We just read, if you can't get there, okay, so you'll turn your offering into money and send it to the temple, right? So it really brings down the importance of the priest and the priestly ritual. And Josiah, it turns out, remember we talked about this one time, a long time ago, Josiah believes so strongly in his religious reform and believes so strongly that God would never allow God's house to be destroyed, that Josiah crosses the king of Egypt, who wants to peacefully cross through Judah. And Josiah says, no, God will protect us, and goes to war against Pharaoh. And that's when they're wiped out and taken down into Egypt. So according to Micha, over-reliance on the temple was the downfall of early Israel. That was the downfall, is that we can't be destroyed because God wouldn't let God's house be destroyed or God's ark be taken into captivity or any of those things. And that Josiah proves them right, that he loses when Israel rebels, it's destroyed. But then Josiah, when he trusts too much in God's protection of God's holy city and God's holy temple and God's holy house and holy throne and holy ark, he's defeated, and they're a vassal state from then on. Okay. So, anybody got anything? Okay.
I was going to say it strikes me that this is almost sending the temple into exile, according to Micha. It's like saying, go up on that mountain, Mount Zion, go up on that mountain and move it all up there, but stay out of our lives here. We're going to live a different. Is it pretty much that?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting take. Very different from the
very different.
If you want,
right? What's important to the Deuteronomist, says Micha, if you look at the Shema, what is supposed to be on our hearts? The words.
The words.
Right? Place these words upon your heart. That's what is supposed to be important. The teachings, the ethical and moral teachings, the words, not the sacrifices, not the offering of incense, not the showbread that the priest puts out every day, right? And once every 7 years, the king is commanded to read this book, meaning the book of Deuteronomy, this Torah. The king must read this Torah to the people every 7 years. So it's really pulling away from the ritual, even though it looks like it's making it more important by centralizing everything in the temple. It's what you said, Bert. It's like, that's over there on that mountain that we don't really have to schlep to anymore. We can do all the important stuff in our village. And if we can't get the worth of the first of our fruits, the actual fruits, to the temple, we can exchange it for what it's worth and send that by courier to the temple, and we don't have to schlep there anymore.
Well, we didn't talk about it last week, but there's this great line, I think it's Deuteronomy 10, where it says, God is Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah, which we say in the Amidah. And the next line is, who takes no bribes. And so
that's right.
Clearly a revolution.
Correct.
That it's not about bribing God. It's
right.
not about doing sacrifices so that God will be nice to us or the universe will be nice. And it gets back to just as Micah, the prophet Micah said, just be good to each other. I think it says that in Deuteronomy as well. And
yes.
What does God demand of you? And it's just to be good to each other.
Right. That's right. So ritual has a place, but it's not everything. It has limited value. And so Micha's quote was, if ritual has all the value, it's worthless. It's valuable only if it's established after criticism of it to keep it in its place.
If Amy?
Yes.
Question. If the essential teaching is that we imprint these words in our minds and our hearts, then why is there such a stress we just returned last night from being with our Froome family, and I don't understand the emphasis on the rebuilding of a building. If it's more about the teachings and carrying those with us, and why do they stress so much the rebuilding of the temple and looking forward to reintroducing the sacrificial system once the temple is rebuilt?
So it's a great question. It's because it's actually anti-Deuteronomist and anti-Jeremiah and anti-Amos and anti-Hosea to say what we're longing for is the temple ritual. Mm-hmm. Right? It's actually counter to all of those prophetic movements and the Deuteronomistic school. So now there's lots of theories. I'm not saying I have a handle on them all, but one theory is that with the loss of sovereignty and the now being exiled and the loss of any kind of political authority or any kind of sense of having control of our own destiny, longing for the temple is longing not only for the temple. It's not so much longing for the temple and its rituals. What is it a longing for? It's a longing for the coming of Mashiach and the coming of the day of judgment, where God will set all of this right. Mm. We will be sovereign in our land. We will have our temple back, because that has to be part of it, right? Or else Torah is, useless. In that sense, those parts of it would be useless. So of course the temple will come back, but what it's really longing for is sovereignty, political, economic sovereignty, and the freedom to, worship in a way that connects us to our land and to our ancestors, and will bring with it justice delivered to the other nations that are oppressing us. Let's be honest. All that stuff is written, Third Temple stuff is all written by people who are being oppressed, whose lives are very precarious based on who's in charge and what the Jewish community's relationship to those powers that be are. So it's a longing from a place of weakness. It's a fantasy of a place of strength and sovereignty. I don't think it's a longing for ritual, because if it was a longing for sacrifice, all of those rabbis would be out of jobs. Right? If the priesthood came back, they would all be out of jobs. So we know it's not that. It's been a longing for God being at the center, God being what's recognized as most powerful and most important, and that being connected to Judaism and Jewish teaching instead of the heresies that we see all around us.
And being able to get close to God. Mm-hmm. Being able to get close to God, because that was what you were doing with sacrifices.
Yeah, but what Betsy is saying is, if we can get close to God in lots of other ways, why all the
absolutely. But for them,
community for the ritual of sacrifice. So I get that's my best kind of gut analysis. The same way we see a rise in rabbinic writing around the afterlife when Jews are being slaughtered in the streets. When it's going well for the Jews, those communities don't write about the afterlife.
Interesting.
Medieval Spain, they don't care about the afterlife. They had a good life in Spain under the Muslim rule. They had a really good life. So they rose to positions of prominence. We were dhimmi, the protected class, people of the book. We were protected. We were monotheists. We had a great life under Islam, not so under Christianity. So when you are looking at Christian medieval people living in Christian medieval times, Jews writing, they are writing a lot about the afterlife, that our reward is there, right? Because life sucks. So I think it's the same with longing for the temple. All of that is when, you feel like you're losing to the dominant, horrible culture that's materialistic and individualistic and worships youth and worships wealth, which I got to say is a pretty fair critique.
Yeah.
Right. It's just our fantasy about what the antidote to that is different than it is in the ultra Orthodox community. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to take us to a few texts. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to leave us on a note of preparing for Elul and moving into the Chagim, because it's where all of us rabbis are, you should know, and all professional Jews are now. I know it's hard to believe since it's August, but we are full in the swing of getting ready for the Chagim. We just had a meeting yesterday talking about the logistics, at Barnum and how are we going to do this because we don't have a service at KI and blah, blah, blah. So we are full in the thick of preparing.
Wait, Amy, I just have to add that I agree with that because I have to listen to Dave blowing the shofar like he just started, and it's crazy making.
So you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. You're living in it too.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to my world. Okay. We can have coffee and, chat about it. All right. Here we go. So this is Rabbi Jordan Bendat Appel. This is from the IJS Elul Shofar Project, which you can find online. If you'd like to look at kind of preparing for Elul through texts, it's the IJS Elul Shofar Project. He's talking about the piece by Rabbi Liu, the Buddhist Jewish teacher Alan Liu. Rabbi Liu introduces Elul with the Torah portion of Re'eh, which he translates as look. He writes, pay attention to your life. Every moment it is profoundly mixed. Every moment contains a blessing and a curse, right? That's the first thing we read. Look, I set before you today blessing and curse. Everything depends on our seeing, Re'eh, on our seeing our lives with clear eyes, meaning that's why the Torah uses this word, seeing the potential blessing at each moment as well as the potential curse, choosing the former, forswearing the latter. Our capacity to choose wisely depends on our capacity to perceive clearly. This isn't a seeing that depends on vision, but one that comes from attentiveness of heart and mind. Elul begins our practice with this commitment to seeing ourselves as clearly as we can and to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul. Many of us spend many hours every day with our bodies hunched over devices. I'm now going to sit up. Attending to the endless details of our daily lives or scrolling through our feeds and messages. This physical posture can induce us to feel low and constricted in spirit. Conversely, looking up, both literally and figuratively, improves our posture and may also lift the spirits and broaden our lived sense of our moment. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, this is one of the enduring themes of Tanakh, the importance of looking up. From Isaiah, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From there will come my help, says Psalm 121. I'm going to skip Dr. Neshama Nicolescu. You can read it on your own if you want. I want to go to, I went down a rabbit hole about teachings about seeing and decided I want to bring you these. Georgia O'Keeffe, writing in response to people who think her flowers are vaginas, says, a flower is relatively small. Everyone has many associations with a flower. The idea of flowers. You put out your hand to touch the flower, lean forward to smell it, maybe touch it with your lips almost without thinking, or give it to someone to please them. Still, in a way, nobody sees a flower, really. It is so small, we haven't time. And to see takes time. Like to have a friend takes time. If I could paint the flower exactly as I see it, no one would see what I see because I would paint it small, like the flower is small. So I said to myself, I'll paint what I see, what the flower is to me, but I'll paint it big, and they will be surprised into taking time to look at it. I will make even busy New Yorkers take time to see what I see of flowers. Well, I made you take time to look at what I saw. And when you took time to really notice my flower, you hung all your associations with flowers on my flower. And you write about my flower as if I think and see what you think and see of the flower. And I don't. So I love this idea that she's saying, here I am trying to show you what I see, because y'all don't take time to see the small, beautiful stuff. I'm going to magnify it so that you have to stop in your tracks because it's so big and in your face and beautiful. And what do? As soon as I try to show you what I see, you see what you see and say that that's what I mean, when that's not what I see. Thank you very much. Even if it is what she sees, right? So it's like, I just love that. So about seeing and about how, we have all of our assumptions about what someone else sees and how someone else sees stuff, and that she's trying to show the beautiful in what she sees in the world that we don't take the time to see. But as soon as she does, everyone's got their assumptions about it. I thought that was wonderful. Okay. This is from Margaret Heffernan from her book, Willful Blindness. She has a YouTube TED Talk also. But I'll give you where I got it was the Marginalian that I read. She says, whether individual or collective, willful blindness, meaning the choice not to see, doesn't have a single driver but many. It is a human phenomenon to which we all succumb in matters little and large. We can't notice and know everything. The cognitive limits of our brains simply won't let us. That means we have to filter or edit what we take in. So what we choose to let through and to leave out is crucial, meaning what we choose to see and what we don't choose to see. We mostly admit the information that makes us feel great about ourselves, while conveniently filtering whatever unsettles our fragile egos and most vital beliefs. It's a truism that love is blind. What's less obvious is just how much evidence it can ignore. Ideology powerfully masks what to the uncaptivated mind is obvious, dangerous, or absurd. And there's much about how, even where we live, that leaves us in the dark. I have to tell you, this leapt off the screen to me, because I'm always like, how can they believe that about a pedophile ring under a pizza place? I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I'm like, oh, here it is. Ideology powerfully masks what to the uncaptivated mind is obvious, dangerous, or absurd. And there's much about how and even where we live that leaves us in the dark. Fear of conflict, fear of change keeps us that way. An unconscious and much denied impulse to obey and conform shields us from confrontation, and crowds provide friendly alibis for our inertia. And money has the power to blind us even to our better selves. So once you start to put all that together, it's like, oh, that's how we see things so differently. And what seems obvious and dangerous to me doesn't to someone else. And for me too, right? Like what I don't see that's so obvious and dangerous to other people is because I have my own beliefs and my own sets of filters on that filters out anything that doesn't fit my narrative and doesn't fit my understanding and view of the world. So there's both seeing and then there's willful blindness. So she suggests, and I listened to her TED Talk, and so what she says is, or maybe it was somebody else in the Marginalian talking about attention. What is attention? It's actually, we think it's about seeing something really clearly. Attention is actually about screening out 99% of everything else. Attention is a form of willful blindness to most things in order to see what we choose to see. It's not saying it's bad. It's just a different way to think about attention. We think about attention as, oh, this is focusing. Yes, it is. And we forget that in order to focus on this 1%, I have to screen out and be willfully blind to 99% of what's around me. And I'll close with Annie Dillard from her book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. The secret of seeing is, then, the pearl of great price. If I thought he could teach me to find it and keep it forever, I would stagger barefoot across 100 deserts after any lunatic at all. But although the pearl may be found, it may not be sought. The literature of illumination reveals this above all. Although it comes to those who wait for it, it is always, even to the most practiced and adept, a gift and a total surprise. I cannot cause light. The most I can do is try to put myself in the path of its beam. It is possible, in deep space, to sail on solar wind. Light, be it particle or wave, has force. You rig a giant sail and go. The secret of seeing is to sail on solar wind. Hone and spread your spirit till you yourself are a sail, wetted, translucent, broadside to the merest puff.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.